Hey everyone, Steve with Off Grid 48. Thought I'd take a break from the wood gasifier videos and talk about some power systems. I get asked quite often about power systems, whether it's developing an off-grid power system or just supplemental power systems for a grid-tied system. So this video I want to talk primarily about a grid-tied system, but also just want to clarify the difference between the two. So an off-grid system is when you're going to generate all of your own power. You're not going to be tied to the grid utility at all. So it's going to require some type of fuel source, whether it's solar, wind, hydro, generators, combination, and then a battery bank to store that, and then an inverter where you're completely 100% self-sufficient in your own power generation. In a grid-tied system, you're generating some or all of your own power, but you're still tied to the utility. And with that, the grid utility is primary, but you're generating some or all of your own power, and you're using that power, and then any excess power, you're essentially selling that back to the power system or using it as credit later on. And so what I want to talk about today is here at our home, we did a grid-tied system last year. It's been almost up for about a year. I'm going to do a separate video that's going to talk about the production, how it actually did over the last year. But today I just want to kind of talk about the different components of the grid-tied system, because there's also a little bit of misconception about the grid-tied system as well. In the off-grid system, you're completely 100% generating your own power. In the grid-tied system, even though you're generating power, if for some reason the power utility gets cut off, you still don't have any power unless you also include a battery bank in that to store energy. Typically a grid-tied system doesn't include a battery bank, so I kind of want to walk through what we've got here at our home. So what we've got is we've got 26 panels that are 300 watt panels. So we've got about a total of 7.8 kilowatts. We had this put up last June. So now we're coming into just around a year of production, and we could look at basically daily production, monthly, weekly. We have a pretty good feel of how our system's going to perform. We use a company called Solar Edge inverters. And then we also use what they call power optimizers on each panel. It's an extra expense, but it also provides some extra benefits that a traditional install wouldn't provide. For example, you've heard the term, a chain is only as good as its weakest link. And you can think of electrical in the same context when you talk about an array of solar panels or even a battery bank of multiple batteries. Basically, your solar array in this example would only be as good as the weakest solar panel in that array. And same thing with batteries. If you had a string of batteries wired up and you had a bad battery or weak battery in the middle, your battery bank's only going to be as good as that weakest battery, which is a real good reason why they say when you're doing solar panels, a lot of people out here, well, I've got a collection of solar panels. I've got some 100 watt panels. I've got a 250 watt or 300 watt. I'm going to put them all together and in series or parallel and just build a system out of that. And same thing with batteries. I've got some old 6-volt batteries, a couple 12 volts. I'm going to put them together and build a 12, 24, 48 volt system. You're asking for trouble when you do that, because when you connect all these things electrically, it's only going to perform as well as the lowest common denominator. In the case of the solar panels, it'll be your lowest panel. So if I put a couple 300 watts, 200 watt, and 100 watt panel in there, I'm only going to get the performance based on 100 watt. So you really should try to keep, when electrically speaking, all the components to the same specifications. Same thing with the battery. If I've got new mixed with old, different amperages, I'm only going to get the performance out of that battery bank as the lowest performing battery in that battery bank. So in the case of the solar panels, these power optimizers are something that provide you the benefit of over time, I can monitor not only the total power generated by my total solar array, I can monitor it down to the individual panel. So I'll know how each panel is doing, and if I've got one panel that fails or is underperforming, I can look at that, and the system will tell me which panel has a problem. So rather than have to shut the whole system down and test each panel individually if I have a problem, this is going to tell me immediately which panel is performing or underperforming. So to me, there's a huge benefit in that, and it also helps me here. You can see that we've got a lot of timber trees, so we've got a lot of shading, and so in my solar array, I can tell which panels are being more affected by shading than other panels. So if I want to take out a tree or so to clear more area for my solar panels, I can now do that by looking at the solar panels and how much energy that it's generating. So we've got the panels, we've got the power optimizers, then we have a combiner box that, because basically we take those solar panels, we connect them into a couple strings, we combine those strings in what's called a combiner box, and then the combiner box has a shutoff, DC shutoff switch. Then we have the actual inverter, which takes the combined energy from all the solar panels and it goes into the inverter. This is all DC energy that's going into the inverter that's going to convert it to AC power that's going to feed it into the electrical system. Then we have an additional cutoff switch, so if there's, ever needs to be electrical work done, we can shut off that power, because if you have somebody come work on your electrical at your system and they turn off your panel, they're assuming that the power is off. But when you have a grid-tied system, if I turn off the utility, power is still coming in from my external source, whether it's solar, wind, hydro, whatever extra power. So there has to be additional safety precautions in the system, additional cutoff switches, so that somebody working on the electrical system wouldn't be surprised by having power in the system when they thought there was no power when they were working on it. Then we have a production meter, which is very similar to your meter. When you go out and look at your electrical meter and you see it spinning and it's got the codes and it shows you how many kilowatt power consumption you've got. The production meter is basically a very similar meter. It's got the same type of display, except it is only showing you what your system is producing. So it'll give you the total kilowatts produced since it was installed. It'll show you the current kilowatts. It'll show you whether you're feeding power into the power system or you're using power from the power system. It basically is just a meter showing you what you are producing. And then between the production meter and the utility meter, there's another cutoff switch there for safety purposes. And then you've got your final utility meter that goes. So basically those are the components of the grid-tied system. Now, as far as operation, what happens is, in a grid-tied system, traditionally, we plug these components in and we start generating some or all of our own power. In my case, these 26 panels are going to represent about a third of what I would actually use over the course of a year. So the way that works out, in the summer months, my panels are producing more than I use, so my power bill will go down to zero, and maybe I'll start feeding power back into the grid as credits. And then later on in the winter, I don't generate as much power, so I'm using more power from the grid. But overall, if I look at it on a yearly basis, I'm generating about a third of my own power. Even those months that I generate 100% of my own power, I still get a power bill. I don't have a power bill of any kilowatt usage, but there are some miscellaneous fees in there. Like they have one they call a connection fee. Just for the luxury of being connected to a utility, they charge you a monthly fee for that, whether you use any electricity or not. It's not very much, 10, 15 bucks a month, but even if I generate all my own power, if I'm connected to the grid, I'm going to always have at least that much monthly bill. And then the next thing with grid-tied systems is to understand is, since there typically is no battery bank in the configuration, my main source of power is coming from the grid. So if there's a power outage in the utility, my power goes out. Now, even if it went out on a nice sunny day and my solar panels are generating plenty of power, I don't have power, because the way the system is designed is the power goes through into the utility. So if the utility gets shut off, then it gets shut off to my box in my house and I don't have any power. For me to maintain power through a utility outage, I would have to add a battery bank component. Now that's something that we didn't do initially. It's something that we have the option of doing down the road. So, I more than likely at some point will put a battery bank in there. But what I did do is I put in a transfer switch in my utility box. So if the power does go out, I can switch it over to a transfer switch, and then I can fire up a generator, just as a lot of people do, and then run my household on that. But wanted to kind of clarify that a lot of misconception is that I've got solar and I'm grid tied. If the grid goes out, I'm running off my solar. That's not the case unless you have a battery bank in there that it can convert to that. So keep that in mind. The next issue or item with a grid-tied system is what they call net metering. And what this is it's basically an agreement with you and your utility company that says when you generate more power than you're using, you're feeding that back into the electrical system, to the utility system, and they're going to credit you back. Now, net metering varies by demographics, and some places will give you a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning for every kilowatt I give to the utility, they give me credit of 1 kilowatt hour. But some places, I don't know, like California and some of these other places, there's so many people are doing this that they're actually discouraging people from doing alternative energy systems, that they have these ratios in there, 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 4-to-1, 5-to-1. And what that means is that I have to, like in a 5-to-1 system, I would have to give the utility company 5 kilowatts before they give me credit for 1. So those are very, unfair systems. But if you're looking at a grid-tied system, I would say first you want to contact your utility and see, they'll more than likely they will have a net metering program. What is their net metering program? What is the ratio? 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 3-to-1. So at least as you're designing your system, you'll know how much credit that you're going to get back. Our system here was 3-to-1, and last year they changed it to 1-to-1, so it's much better for us. So I'll go through and show you some of the components. I'll show you where our panels are installed. I'll show you where the boxes are installed on the outside, and then I'm going to do a separate video that's actually going to show you the data and the production data over the last year, because there's also a lot of misconceptions to say, hey, if I've got a 5 kilowatt or 10 kilowatt system and I've got 8 or 10 hours a day of solar, I'm just, I can calculate. That's not always the case. When you have to look, the benefit of my system is I can go through with it. I actually have an app on my phone that I can get data, and I can look at my system for 5-minute intervals. I can look at what every panel is doing and generating cumulative through the day, up every 5 minutes. So from the time the sun comes up to the time the sun goes down, I've got all the data, bar charts, graph charts, that will show me total generation. And I can see, obviously at noon you're going to have the highest. When the sun's the highest, that's going to be your highest generation, and then it's going to go down. So I can calculate based on my solar panels, the amount of energy I'm generating every day, the time of the year. I'll know very accurately how much power that I'm generating, and I'll do a separate video on that, because as you design your system and start figuring how much power you need to generate or you want to generate, what size system are you going to need to accomplish that? And so we'll go through some of those processes and how to size your system. But I just wanted to kind of give an overview of our grid-tied system, and then I'll follow it up with another video that's going to show you some data from that system. All right, thanks.